So there's something to be said there. Okay, chapter 3. That's it for chapter 2. Chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. And verse 1. We're going to read till verse 7, friends, okay? Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was 80 cubits. A score is 20, so 3 scores 3 times 20, so it's 60. A cubit in the Bible is from calculated du coude au majeur, so from the elbow to your major. So usually on an average man, I'm just under average, on an average man it's 18 cubits. That doesn't help. Okay, 1 cubit, 18 inches. But there's also a royal cubit sometimes in the Bible, and that is 21 inches. So take 19.5 inches, multiply by 60, and you have the height here. I'll make some space for you, sister. Okay. Sorry about that. Here we go. Isn't this nice and clean? I'm excited about the board. Huh? Oh, sorry?
What's your recipe?
Wait, there. Yeah. So, where are we going? Yeah, so 3 score cubits, 60 cubits high, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, 10-to-1 ratio. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, same place where the Tower of Babel was built. We'll see that in a second. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent to gather together the princes, the governors and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Why? That's repetitive, but tells you it's important. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up, and whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up." Make a note, just for a bit later. You've got Nebuchadnezzar, we'll call him Nebi, okay? And you've got the image. And who's the third character that you read about there? The herald, yeah. Hark the herald. Angels, that's not an angel called herald, huh? Hark the herald angels. The announcers, les annonceurs. Yeah, it's not angels called herald. Okay. Super interesting stuff in there going on. Now, I think my sister told me that. If it's not my sister, it's my wife. And if it's not my wife, it's my mom. So one of the three, as they were reading Daniel, they told me it's interesting that the devil's punishment imitates God's punishment. If you refuse to worship me, you burn. Right? Yeah, see, and people are funny because they judge God for that. It's so unfair of God to put a judgment of fire for refusal to worship him. And the government do exactly that. They do exactly that. So I think the devil knows he's going to burn. So he wants to mete out the same punishment to us. All right. In verse 4 and 7, it spoke about nations and languages. Different nations and different languages. I don't know how much, do I have enough juice in there? Yeah, I do. Some loose. Okay, so what that tells you is that it was an international gathering. That's an international gathering. Later on, you're going to read if you remember in the book of Esther, when the Persian kingdom takes over, basically the same kingdom but a bit enlarged, it says that Artaxerxes or Ahasuerus ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, if you remember that. That kingdom is big. There's many different nations there. So when you're reading that, the best thing that you can visualize today to understand the scene is the Olympic Games. Think Olympic Games. I know they don't involve worship yet. Okay, yet. I have nothing against sports. I'm not saying sports are bad. I love sports. I love watching the Olympics. It's great. But that's what you want to kind of visualize in your head. This is massive. This is not a little thing going on in some backwards province. This is, people have been training for this. People have been invited for this. There are dancers, there are performers, there's an elaborate opening ceremony, there's an elaborate dedication ceremony, and there's an entire music band, and it's blaring on speakers, and the streets of Babylon are being filled with chariots and tourists and visitors. This is what's going on. That's an image, of course, of what's to come in the future, right? So actually, the even better visualization you can take is not only just the Olympics, it's specifically the 1936 Olympics, which were held in Berlin. Good job. Was that like just a guess, or you remember? It's pretty cool. Okay, under Hitler, who at that point had been reigning for 3 years as the, in effect, dictator of Germany since 1933. In 1933, he became the dictator. 1936, he hosts the Olympic in a bid. Remember, the Bible is talking about modern things. Okay, Hitler is a great type of the Antichrist. And the whole point was we're going to show off the superior Aryan race. That was the whole point, that like, look how much Germany is superior physically because they're a purer race than the other races. And actually, Germany won the most medals in those Olympics. Okay? I just like the fact that Jesse Owens, though, I don't know if you know that, but Jesse Owens won all the gold medals. He was a black man from the States, and he won gold medals in the entire relays. So I think it was the Lord's little way of like, just going like this to Hitler. It's fun, so I appreciate it. It was good. I would have liked to see that, man. Eat some popcorn, watch that. So he instituted, now there was actually an Aryans only policy in the nation. Only Aryans, purebred Aryans, could compete in the Olympics on behalf of Germany. And they were going to ban Jews and certain ethnicities to come to Germany. There was a movement in the States saying we have to boycott the 1936 Olympics. There was a big debate here going on, whether we boycott them or not. And in the end, they still went. And some historians correctly say today that by going, you kind of legitimized the man and you made him look sophisticated and rational. Remember 1936 now, okay? The World War II hasn't broken out, so people are not sure, is this guy a madman or is he rational? Like, is it as bad as people are saying? Because a lot of people did not believe the reports of what was going on in Germany. The Jews didn't believe the reports of what was going on in Germany. And it's going to happen again, guys. It's going to happen again. So, temporarily, Germany took down anti-Jewish propaganda and did what they could to clean up Germany's image prior to the games. In the end, though, the Americans participated anyway. Though Hitler's attempt to see Aryan athletes triumph was not a complete success because of Jesse Owens mostly, Germans did win most medals. Listen to this. It kind of dulled, I'm quoting, it kind of dulled the opposition to Hitler that clearly had been quite evident up to 1936. A lot of people felt he was headed in the wrong direction, and by going to the Olympic Games, we gave him the opportunity to appear sane, rational, and tolerant. Behind the scenes, however, the Olympics presented hardly a pause in the terrible progress of Nazism. As Jesse Owens was running to victory, two Jewish runners, it's funny, because who's the opposition here? It's three Jewish guys. Okay, listen to this. As Jesse Owens is running, Mark Glickman, two Jewish runners for the US team, Mark Glickman and Stam Stoller, had been pulled out by their coach from the 100-meter relay the day before the event in what was believed by Glickman to be an attempt not to embarrass Germany. Because if you had Jews that won that thing, there's politics involved in that stuff. You want good relations with Germany, They're being rebuilt as a powerhouse after the destruction of World War I. After the games, William E. Dodd, then the US ambassador to Germany, said Jews awaited the restoration of anti-Semitic Nazi actions with fear and trembling. They were paused during the Olympics. According to the US Holocaust Memorial and Museum, The head of the Olympic Village, Captain Wolfgang Fürstner, killed himself 2 days after the Games upon his dismissal from military service due to his Jewish ancestry. Many Jewish athletes who either competed in the Olympics prior to 36 or at the 36 Olympics itself would die in concentration camps during the Holocaust. Among them were Ilya Schreibman, a Polish swimmer, and Roman Kantor, a Polish fencer, both of whom competed in 1936 and later died in Majdanek. Notably, Alfred Nakache, a French swimmer who competed in 1936 Games, would also compete in 1948 Olympics, having survived Auschwitz. I should have read the part, maybe it would have been made more sense to you, but you guys know the story that you have 3 Jewish men that said, we're not going to bow down to that stuff, and they're sent off to the fire like those Jewish men committing suicide. So, just to let you know that what you read here is not some dead history. We've seen parallels in probably your parents' and grandparents' age that they've seen things like that happening, and they are coming again. Did you notice how many times the musical instruments were mentioned?
Yes.
Isn't that kind of strange to repeat that? And here's the thing, the dimensions of the image are 60 cubits in height, right? And it's 6 cubits in width. And did you count how many musical instruments? Are they in verse 5? I think verse 5 lists. Yeah. And 6 musical instruments. Right? Oh, it's so clean and nice. I love it. And you can probably read better off of that. So in verse 5 he says the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and the dulcimer. You say, what does that mean? That's Hebrew for rock, rap, hip hop, pop, techno, house, underground, punk, rhythm, like heavy metal, all that kind of stuff, which it's a heavy metal image. These instruments of music are listed 4 times in the chapter. 4 times. The Holy Ghost very much wants you to notice that. So it shows you that the worship of God in heaven was accompanied of music, with formerly Lucifer as the maestro, but it also shows you that during the tribulation, the worship of the Antichrist will be accompanied by music. Remember that image, it's an image, right? What happens in Revelation chapter 13? You've got the false prophet that shows up, and the beast that shows up, and they force everybody to worship an image. In Revelation 13, you have the dragon, and you have the Antichrist. But who tells people to make an image of the Antichrist and to worship it? The Antichrist? False prophet. Okay, look in Revelation 13. Open up to Revelation 13. The parallel is amazing. That's what you're reading in the book of Daniel. You're reading, there's nothing new under the sun. That which hath been is the thing which shall be. Sorry about the cameras. I know some of you, it's like looking through a forest. But you can go back and watch the videos after. So, Revelation chapter 13. Did I pray?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Revelation 13. Well, 15. Yeah, it's mentioned a few times, but the particular passage there with the best match, if you look in 13, well, let's start, 15 will do. Revelation 13, 15. This is the second beast. Maybe you can look one verse before. Look in verse 11, 13, 11. Révélation 13, 11, 13, 11. He says, I beheld another beast, other than the beast that comes out of the sea. Okay, other than the Antichrist. I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. See the dragon? He spake as a dragon. He exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. So it's not the Antichrist that forces them, it's another beast forcing the world to worship the Antichrist. He's the spokesperson for him. He's the representative for him. He's his agent, I guess. He's the agent. If you look in verse 15, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand. So the one that's getting them to worship him is somebody else. And what you have in Daniel chapter 3 verse 4, you've got that herald there. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded. He's representing the image, and the herald tells people, you worship the image. And in Revelation, it's a false prophet telling the people you worship the beast. You have also a picture of that. Look in 1 Samuel chapter 17. That stuff, that imagery comes up over and over again to illustrate to you what's gonna come up in the future. And just because it comes up in the course of a story, of a narrative in the Bible, doesn't mean that it's not prophetic. It's doubly interesting. You're gonna see why. So 1 Samuel chapter 17. And look in verse 4, guys. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 4. 1 Samuel 17:4. It says there, 1 Samuel 17:4, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. It's fun, yeah. The guy's height is the width of the base of the image. And he had an helmet of brass upon his head, that's 1. And he was armed with a coat of mail, that's 2. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, that's 3. And a target of brass between his shoulders, that's 4. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, that's 5 pieces of equipment, and one bearing a shield before him. He's got 6 pieces of equipment. And one bearing a shield went before him. Did you catch that? Yeah. He's got his own announcer. And he's a type, remember, and he's a giant. Picture of the image. And in chapter 2, we saw also an image which gets destroyed, and it's a giant image. And we had said that David is a type of Jesus Christ. The stone comes back, destroys the image. How does David kill the Goliath? With a stone. And Goliath's height, 6 cubits. And Nebuchadnezzar's image, 60 cubits. And it matches your setup there where you have the dragon, the Antichrist, and the prophet. And Goliath has his own announcer, a guy bearing the shield before him. See how they all come together? So what you're reading there in Daniel chapter 3 is unequivocally a picture of Revelation chapter 13. So what we can expect after we're out of here, when the tribulation starts, is when the Antichrist, opens up, does his rule openly, there's going to be an opening ceremony in Jerusalem, though, this time. And people are going to fly from all over the world after Jerusalem is taken in the middle of the tribulation. And there's going to be a huge flags. And you ever seen, if you want to get a picture of that, you can still see it today in North Korea. Saddam Hussein used to have things like that too, but to a lesser degree, less sophisticated than the Asians. The Asians are much more proficient at that kind of stuff, albeit cruel. North Korea, at his birthday, the children train for months and months and months after school. Arduous training, long hours, and they have like elaborate opening ceremonies just for his birthday. And then he doesn't show up sometimes, and you can see the girls are like crying because they wanted him to show up. It's real worship. Some of it, of course, is forced crying, because if you're not crying, you go to prison. Show how much you love the leader. Show how much you love the leader. I think that stuff is gonna be on a global scale, and there's gonna be a music going on, playing, and people are gonna have to fall down and worship the image of the Antichrist that will be set up this time, not in the Land of Shinar, although there will be a connection also to the Land of Shinar, but that will be set up in Jerusalem. So if you look at the instruments, though, if you go back to the musical instruments, which are 6, When you read about them in verses 5, they're in verse 5 and 7 and 10 and 15. Okay, but you can just look at verse 5 if you wish. But when you read about those instruments, cornet and flute and harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, it's not like banging the bongos. There's something sophisticated going on. This is sophisticated music. When you've got harps involved, dulcimer is supposedly something like a piano. The cornet, c'est une trompette. Like the curved one. This is sophisticated music, guys. So what that tells you, we tend to associate automatically heavy metal with the devil. Not necessarily. The devil has some sophisticated taste, because remember, the workmanship of thy tabrets, drums, and of thy pipes was created in thee in the day that thou was prepared in thee, in the day that thou was created. So when God created Lucifer, built into his body were musical instruments. He's a master musician. He's a maestro. He's the Mickey Mouse in Fantasia going like this. He's brilliant in music. He's brilliant at a lot of things, but particularly in music. So just the devil's kingdom has a mark of sophistication. That's one of the things that fooled the world with Europe, because Germany was the most sophisticated country. It was the country of Goethe and Beethoven and Mozart. And how can the country that produced that, in people's minds, produce the atrocity of Nazism? Of course, that's a naive worldview because they don't know the Bible. There's no connection between natural ability and righteousness. On the contrary, most of the time, it creates somebody who's actually evil. The most dangerous people in the world are the smartest, more sophisticated people. I'm much more worried about the genius than I am about the guy that's going to cut off my head, to be honest, Because that guy, I can defend myself more or less. The one who's very good at it and then puts music to it. I don't know if you know, it's one of the weirdest things. You don't hear too much about that. It was heartbreaking to read. One of the weirdest things in World War II is they would, in Psalm 1, I forget which Psalm, one of the Psalms, the 130s. The famous song, By the Rivers of Babylon? By the rivers of Babylon, right? Bonnie M, and then it was taken up by Abba. Well, what happened there is, that psalm says that the Babylonians required of us a song. And then the answer of the Jews to the Babylonians is, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? You've raped our women, you've hung our princes by their hands, you've killed us with starvation and destroyed our country, and now you want us to sit down and play for you music. That's the ultimate mental torture. And what the Nazis would do that. So what they would have is, as the Jews were being brought into the concentration camps, and a lot of them were excellent violinists, they would force the musicians among them, they would put them on the side, and you would walk in through the gate. So you gotta, I get the chills, man, just thinking about it, honestly. But the Bible is amazingly true. So what happens is and they're naked, a lot of them walking in, and they know they're going to be tortured and killed. So you have that, and in a weird kind of mixed up universe, they would walk in, there's other Jews of them, and they're playing orchestra. Beautiful music. So you've got this music going on, but you're going into the gas chambers. It's just, that's what you're reading. That's what you're reading. Okay.
That's why in Israel now, Wagner, there is no.
We're gonna get to Wagner in a second.
Wagner,
Yeah.
no
Right. Now, understandably so, because it wasn't just his music. Hitler. Yeah. Right. Well, he was Hitler's favorite. Yeah. Well, Wagner was Hitler's favorite. He had three favorites. He had Beethoven, Wagner, and I don't know, his name's there, Bernstein or something like that. But Wagner had written in the 19th century an entire polemic against the Jews. That's why he was Hitler's favorite. It wasn't just for his music. We'll get to that actually right there. Bruckner, the other one was. So the instruments listed suggest something sophisticated, more than pop, something more akin to classical music. Sophistication is often a cover for cruelty. Hitler was a fan of the standards defined as good music, good German music. For many musicians, survival meant compromise. Many tried to strike a balance between allegiance to Germany and commitment to their work because he purged the music. According to Hitler and Goebbels, who was his second command and the guy who was in charge of propaganda, the Germans were obsessed with categorizing everything. They're very organized. Everything had to be categorized. They would not even, the evil they did, they had to write laws before they would do the evil. It's a weird kind of japhetic mindset. But so they categorized what good music was, and the three masters composers Four of them were Ludwig van Beethoven, Richard Wagner, and Anton Bruckner. All three composers lived prior to the 20th century. Thank you. Hitler identified himself with Beethoven as possessing that heroic German spirit. Wagner was his favorite. During World War I, it is reported he carried Wagner's music from Tristan, the opera, in his knapsack. Often Hitler had Wagner's music performed at party rallies and functions. Today, like you see, basically like at the political rallies, you have rock and roll songs in the States. Well, this guy was playing Wagner. Wagner's music was uncompromisingly serious and intensely Teutonic. It was not only Wagner's music that struck a chord with Hitler, pun intended, but also his political views. Wagner wrote a violently anti-Semitic booklet in the 1850s called that's some German thing. Judaism and Music, the translation is, insisting that the Jews poisoned public taste in the arts. Okay, so here's the connection now. Well, I should have read the rest of the chapter. Look here, look what happens. Look in verse 8. Wherefore at that time of Daniel chapter 3, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Now here's what you want to get. The Chaldeans are Aryans. This is Babylon. I don't know if you know this, but Iran and Germany were allies during World War II because the Germans considered the Iranians Aryans. The Germans considered the Iranians, the Persians, Aryans. The Shah of Iran and Hitler were friends. And some of the Nazi propaganda was being taught in Persian schools. I'm talking about pre-Islamic revolution in Iran, pre-1979. Okay, the Arabs were like lesser form, but the Germans knew that the Persians are not Arabs. So Persia and Germany were allied. What you've got there is a bunch of Chaldeans, which would be the Aryans, accusing Jews of not bowing down to the system. Just like in Germany, right? The Jews were being reported to the governing officials that they're not following the system. They're poisoning the country. They need to be eliminated. That's what you have. And so they spake in verse 9 and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. It's incredible, the parallel. So, Wagner founded the Bayreuth Festival, which in the 1930s and 40s was used by the Nazi Party as propaganda tool against the Jews. Anton Bruckner considered himself a disciple of Wagner. Bruckner and Wagner were contemporaries, composing much of their music between 1845 and 1880. Bruckner met Wagner in 1865 at the premiere of Tristan and Isolde in Munich. He dedicated his third symphony to Wagner. Music historians have referred to Bruckner's Adagio of the Seventh Symphony as Adagio of Premonition. You know why? Because the music that was written with funerals in mind, and that's the music that Hitler used to send people to the death camps. So basically what Nebuchadnezzar set up was the equivalent of Mecca, but with music. Mecca being the center of Islam, right? Yes, sir.
Sorry to bring you back. The Chaldean, they came from Germany or from Iran? Yeah.
Indo-Aryans. So a lot of people will tell you they're the same people. So when you think about the Chaldeans in the Bible, think white people. Okay? I know that today, so what you have to keep in mind, what's happened, now when we think of Middle East, we think more darker Arabs. And one of the reasons because of Muhammad in the 7th century, the Arabs came out of the Arabian Peninsula and took over the Middle East. And they Arabized it. So the Middle East became darker, if you want, as far as skin goes, right? So, but this is before the Arab invasions. So the rulers there are Shemites. They're not as dark as the Arabs from the Arabian Peninsula. So and so for the Germans, they saw a connection there, and there was pretty much one. There's a case to be made, according to some historians, that there's some connection between the German people and the people that came out of the Shemites that came out and the Japhethites that came out of that area of the world. No problem. Okay. All right, what's going on with that image, of course, is it's a competition between the devil and God. Because that image is the image of man, and they're told to worship the image of man. So in fact, they're worshiping man. Jesus Christ, look in 2 Corinthians 4:4. 3 times in the scriptures that Jesus Christ is called the image of God. And it's really nice that 3 times Christ is called the image of God. And of course, he's the fullness of the Trinity. It's only 3 times that you get that in the Bible. And 3 times you have the word Godhead in the Bible. Look in 2 Corinthians 4:4. What you have there is the devil transferring worship to the image of God, who's Jesus Christ, to himself or to man. 2 Corinthians 4:4, in whom the God of this world, represented by Nebuchadnezzar, hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. And so instead of people worshiping, when you worship Jesus Christ, you are worshiping an image. Spiritually, because Jesus Christ is the image of God. So you're worshiping the image of God, but spiritually. And so what the devil does, he sets up the image of man, and a sinful man at that, and he gets you to worship man. And that's exactly Romans chapter 2, verse 4. He says, who worshipped and served the creature more than the creator. The ultimate religion, if you simplify it, the ultimate religion, the Antichrist religion will be the religion of man. It will be the worship of man. I mean, his number is 666. Man's number is 6, were created on the 6th day. That's what you've got going on there. There's definitely, actually, you can check it in the notes, but I want to save time. But you've got the image here of Nebuchadnezzar. Christ is called the image of God. Then if you look in Daniel chapter 2, verse 31, in Daniel 2:31, if you go back to Daniel chapter 2:31, the image has a form. Daniel 2:31, it says, thou, O king, sawest, and behold a great image, this great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. See that? Daniel 2:31. Well, in chapter 3, Christ has a form. Because Nebuchadnezzar says the form of the 4th is as the Son of God. The image is described as terrible in chapter 2. The appearance of the angel of the Lord in Judges 13 is described as terrible. You don't have to get the verses, I'm just telling you. The notes are all there, you can open them up online if you want after. In Daniel chapter 2, the image is golden. And in Daniel chapter 10, when Christ shows up, he is wearing fine gold of Uphaz. In Daniel chapter 3, that image has height and breadth. And in Ephesians chapter 4, the Bible talks about the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. So there's basically what I'm telling you is almost every detail that you read about the image, you can find a corresponding right detail, but that's connected to Jesus Christ. So whatever that thing is, man, it's somebody replacing Jesus Christ in point by point to get their worship directed on them. And that's why the worship of images is so wicked. We're going to end up, that will be the ultimate sin in the end. Now we're kind of used to not having it. The Jews don't have images anymore. I don't know if you know this, but the Catholic Bibles take out the 2nd commandment. In a lot of Catholic Bibles, they have 9 commandments. Yeah, they have 9 commandments. They split them to make them a total of, not always. Sometimes they don't split them, and some of them they split them, and sometimes they just leave. It happened. The family members it was posted on Facebook in Arabic, and you know what they did? Because they had 9, and to make him look like 10, they put as the first commandment, I am the Lord thy God. So they put I am the Lord thy God, and then they went as number 1. Then they went, thou shalt have no other gods before me as number 2, and then they went to thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, number 3. Because and I pointed out, I said, that's 9 commandments. I am the Lord thy God is not a commandment. That's the introduction. Thou shalt have no other gods before me is the first. The second that you guys took out is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image of anything that is under the earth, that is under the heaven or earth or under the earth, or in the waters under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, right? Nor worship them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. Them that hate me. And so, now, I did something once with the Arabic people when I used to preach to them here during the Arabic services. I read them, I didn't tell them who it was, but I read them a Buddhist defense of the use of stones, of images. But I didn't tell him it was a Buddhist. So I read the whole thing, and the whole thing was, we don't really worship the image. It's just an aid to worship. It's like having a picture of your parents in your wallet. And it's a paragraph like this. I read through the whole thing. I said, who do you think wrote that? He's like, well, it's a Catholic priest or an Orthodox priest. He says, no, that's what the Buddhists say. The Buddhists have the exact same defense that we used to have as Catholics and Orthodox, and they still have. So it's like, so nobody worships images. I mean, why did the Lord put that commandments? Because apparently I can't find anybody. Have you ever found anyone that said, yes, I actually worship the piece of stone? Nobody says that. Everybody says it just helps me, and it's a representation. Well, as far as the Lord's concerned, is thou shalt not make. So it's like a child saying, it's like Saul trying to justify it. Yeah, I know you said that, but I did it because it helps me worship you. And the Lord says, but I said down, it's like a kid, you know? But I told you don't do that. But Daddy, I did it for you. Yeah, but if you did it for me, I said don't do it. That's all I care about, you know? Obedience is better than sacrifice. And and the world's going to go back to it. We're just going to go back to it. When you take out the image of God, you need to worship a substitute. So when you don't have Christ, you're going to worship the Antichrist. There's just no escaping that. Wow, there's so much there. And now it's an amazing thing too that that's image, that evil gets set up in the plain of Dura in the land of Shinar. If you read then Daniel chapter 3, right? It's in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. The plain of Dura, we saw it under chapter 1, so I don't have time to go back through it again, is the land of Shinar. The land of Shinar, remember when we said that Shinar is the Bible word for Sumer? And that's Babylon. So it's in the Sumerian plain. That's where that evil image is set up. That's where people are forced to worship. Now look in Zechariah. Look in Zechariah chapter 5. Something is going to happen again, friends, in Iraq again. Either at the same time as Jerusalem or right before the image moves to Jerusalem. Because that image might be moved there. Zechariah chapter 5. Zechariah chapter 5. So right before Malachi, the penultimate book in your Old Testament. Zechariah 5, Zechariah 5. Listen to this. This is super interesting chapter. Then I turned and lifted. Oh, if you thought that all this stuff about like aliens coming down to earth in last session on Daniel is just crazy talk and not really biblical, explain this chapter. Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. Then said he unto me, this is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. For everyone that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side according to it, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it. I will bring it forth. This is tribulation stuff, guys. Saith the Lord of hosts, and shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name, and shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. Not that I deny that there must have been some partial historical application. Okay, so already this is a weird kind of image. He sees a flying roll. He's like, what in the world is that? Watch this now, verse 5. Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, lift up now thine eyes and see, what is this that goeth forth? It's a flying thing. And I said, what is it? So if you want to be technical about it, there's a flying object, and the guy says, what is it? And that gives you an unidentified flying object. Okay. And he said, this is an ephah that goeth forth. You know what an ephah looks like? I kid you not, man. But they have all kinds of different ephahs. I have a diagram of ephahs. Most of them are like this. And they put the wheat in there, Yeah, so imagine it as made of something, whatever. Yeah, straw. And they put wheat in there. But that's the look. Right? That's the look right there. That's what ephahs look like. I have pictures of ephahs from Israel. And I'm not kidding. They look like this. So you've got something that looks like this that's flying. And Zechariah is like, what in the world is this? Okay? Now it gets even weirder. Just show you, I'm not making that stuff up. This is your Bible. The angel tells him, in the middle of verse 6, how many ephahs does he see? One. But the angel tells him there's more. And he tells him it's an international phenomenon. He says, this is their resemblance through all the earth. It looks like that. He says, it looks like this. All you have to do is check out what an ephah looks like. It pays to study the Bible. The angel tells him, it looks like this. Their resemblance. So you have different forms, but they look like an ephah. And he says, throughout all the earth. He says there's some of that stuff flying all over the world. Of course, a lot of it is fake, you understand? But you, I mean, what? And look what happens. Now, here's what there was a question. Yes, Tiffany.
How big is it? Is it like the same size as the ephah?
You can actually calculate how big it is. It's 1/10 of an omer. It's something like this. It's not. So a regular ephah is not huge, but you're gonna see we have an idea of the size now. Okay, it can fit a human being. I'm telling you, man, you can't make that stuff up. Okay.
20 cubits and the breadth.
That's the roll. That's the roll. Yeah, this is an ephah now. Yeah. So, is it a good phenomenon or an evil phenomenon? It's an evil phenomenon. Verse 7, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. So it's big enough to fit somebody, and it's covered, and it closes, and with lead, that's a metal. Now you've got flying metal, you've got somebody inside something that looks like this. You've got something inside. And he says there's plenty of them, they're all over the world. Verse 8. Now the Bible tells you, they're not saviors coming to help you. He has to tell, and he said, this is wickedness, buddy, okay? He said, this stuff is evil. It's not, oh, beam me up, Scotty, although he never says that in Star Trek, but this is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. Then lifted I up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings. Okay? I know we say all angels are only male, and they don't have wings, but we kind of don't mention that verse. Okay? Because I got a question for you. We'll go through that in Genesis. If the sons of God saw the daughters of women that they were fair and they desired them, that presupposes, or that implies a pre-existing potential for sexual desire. How do you desire something of which you have no notion? What in the world did they saw them and they desired them because they were good looking. So that tells you there's already something in their makeup that makes them desire beautiful women. So and I read here, and those things are not human, that's for sure. They've got wings of a stork, and they're not bringing a baby. You know that old thing with storks bringing babies? You've got a stork, two women with the wings of a stork carrying a woman inside a basket. By the way, you want something? I took a course in statistics in university between the difference between causation and correlation, and it checks out. It's a weird kind of statistic, but countries with more storks than Germany have higher birth rates every single time. And it was a study that was done to show that there's a difference between correlation and causation. The storks are obviously not causing the births, okay? But that stuff, there's something spiritual behind that stuff. They're women and they've got wings. Now, if that means that there are some female angels, then that makes more sense to me now why the angels could desire the daughters of men, the males. And the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. That's big wings. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to, all that, you've ever seen all those, I will do that in Minor Prophets, I can't get derailed. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. And I said to the angel that talked with me, whither do these bear the ephah? Here's why I was reading that chapter. And he said unto me, to build it an house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. The land of Shinar. So this is evil that's being set up in the land of Shinar, and that's where Nebuchadnezzar sets up his image, in the land of Shinar. And of course, that image needs a base. It stands on a base. The image stands on a base. So something soon, if we get raptured, something in the tribulation, Iraq becomes the center of evil again. And I'm talking about something much more sophisticated than Islam. Something, there's some, Area 51, it's got her own base. That's still wet. I hope I can still draw on this thing. Okay, now look. The sin of worshiping the image of man is connected by Paul to sodomy. Okay, look in Romans chapter 2. Look in Romans chapter 2. Pascal, est-ce que je pourrais te troubler, s'il te plaît, avec le papier brun? Juste pour assécher le tableau en attendant. Look in Romans chapter 2. No, chapter 1, forgive me. Chapter 1, Romans chapter 1. Thanks. Yeah, it's connected to sodomy. Look at Romans chapter 1, verses 24 and 25. Yes. Okay. Wherefore, this is Romans 1:24. C'est pourquoi, right? Wherefore, God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. There's a key verse I'm missing there. I think it's the verse before where it talks about the image, who changed the image of the uncorruptible God. 23? Okay. That should be in the quote. Right, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God, verse 23, into an image made like the corruptible man. You see that? So, instead of worshiping the image of God, they worship the image of man, and because of that, according to Paul, God gives them up to, the sin of sodomy. You ever wonder why the biggest organization on earth that worships images got the highest rate of sodomy? Right? Okay? So, well, okay. What's, you ever read Asterix and Obelix?
Wait.
Obelix. You know why it's called Obelix? Huh?
Stone carrier.
Yeah, but what is all Obelix, the word?
Is it like one of
It's
those
a shape.
little pyramid on
Yeah.
top?
It's from this. But it's a play on words, so he switches it. Uderzo and Goscinny, I think, were Asterix and Obelix, and they call them Obelix. What those were pillars pointed up to heaven. It was all over the heathen world, the ancient world, Egypt. And so, you can make the connection on your own as far as the imagery and what that represents. Because, by the way, nobody until this day knows how those obelisks were built. You've got one in the Piazza of St. Peter in the Vatican. You've got the Washington Monument, which is the tallest obelisk in the world, built after the Egyptian obelisks. The ratio of Nebuchadnezzar's obelisk is 10:1. It's 60 cubits by 6. It's a 10:1 ratio. That's the ratio of the ancient Egyptian pyramids. The Karnak obelisk has that ratio. Cleopatra's Needle has that ratio, and the unfinished obelisk has that ratio, 10:1. The Egyptian-styled Washington Monument has the same dimensions. At the ground level, each side of the monument. So here's Nebuchadnezzar's image, and let's say it's an obelisk, okay? At the ground, This is 6, and this is 60. The Washington Monument, tallest obelisk now in the world, on the side it's 5, every side. Every side measures 55 feet long on every side. You know how many inches that is? It's 55.5 feet long exactly every side. You know how many inches that is? In inches, if you convert the feet to inches? Yeah. Every side is 666 inches. The height of the obelisk is 55. It's 55.5 feet, and that gives you 6,666 inches of height. Tallest obelisk in the world. So what those are is a representation of you can figure it out of what that is against God. And that's why the judgment is coming. Now, you say, that kind of stuff, is it connected to the Antichrist? Because Nebuchadnezzar raised up an image. It wasn't a pillar. Look in 2 Samuel chapter 18. 2 Samuel chapter 18.
When did they start to make these images?
Oh, old time. And it's I didn't know this till when I studied this. I knew that megalithic structures, they can't explain how they were built, because you have to remember they're always saying that mankind 10,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago is Stone Age still. So mankind has not even yet mastered the use of copper, let alone iron, because iron has a higher melting point. So the idea of Copper Age, Bronze Age, Stone Age, you can forget about that idea, okay? That's non-scientific. It's not only not biblical, it's not even scientific at all. That whole idea of Stone Age, Iron Age, Bronze Age and Iron Age, the whole idea there is just that bronze, you can smelt it at lower temperatures, so the kind of technology required to achieve that temperature is easier, so you would have achieved that temperature at an earlier period of humankind. If you take an evolutionary look at history, iron is much harder to melt, so it would have taken longer, right, to figure out how to melt it and mold it. Now, and so the same people that tell you that stuff, though, cannot explain megalithic structures. Megalithic is big stone structures, and we've got all kinds all over the world. You've got them in Lebanon. You've got the pyramids, of course, famously in Egypt. You've got them with the Aztecs and the Incas and the pyramids in Puebla and Mexico. And we're talking about like 60-ton blocks that are as smooth as a sheet, and you can't put a piece of paper between two rocks. Yes. And so it's an amazing thing. They live in a state of constant contradiction. They can't figure out. Their most recent one is Göbekli Tepe. Mireille is we were just talking about that yesterday night after church in our place with Mireille. She's studying that right now. Göbekli Tepe is a massive, massive worship center in the modern day Turkey. And they've dated it to 11,000 BC, and it's been 2 years. Go check it out. It's been 2 years. It's absolute consternation in the academic world. They said that discovery changes everything, because according to their dating system, 11,000 BC, and you've got huge, huge blocks of stone with faces of animals on top of them, and they fill a hill. And they're figuring out, well, 11,000 BC, people were still, hunters, gatherers. They haven't even discovered agriculture. So how could they be building monuments like this? So I knew about megalithic structures, but it turns out even the simple obelisks, the unfinished obelisk, there's one that they found, it's still in Egypt in the ground. And it's dug up. You can go visit it. And I didn't know it, but they don't know how the obelisks were made. Because for them, it's impossible. So instead of saying, well, our model is wrong, men were more advanced back then than we think, they just say, well, there's got to be a way, we'll figure it out. That's what they say. So talking about pillars, 2 Samuel chapter 18, look at this. Absalom, one of the greatest figures of the Antichrist in the Bible, he rebels against his father David. He tries to steal the kingdom. He's perfect in beauty and very wise, like the devil. His name means father of peace, and the Antichrist, the Bible says, by peace shall destroy many in Daniel 8:25. So the Antichrist's kids all die, and Absalom's got 3 sons, and they all die. And 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 18 says this. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself a pillar, not an image, the obelisk, a pillar, which is in the king's dale. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance, and he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's place. And when Judas dies, who's connected to the Antichrist in the Bible, in Acts chapter 1, Peter says that he went to his own place. And you know where Absalom gets buried? In a pit. Like the devil who goes into a pit.
Would that be Shinar's?
No, it wasn't in Shinar. Okay? But just to show you that the type of the Antichrist rears up for himself a pillar, just like Nebuchadnezzar did. Now that thing, according to the Lord, look in Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24, more familiar territory now. I can't believe, and the Vatican brought, you know how many obelisks there are in Rome? 13. And they brought an Egyptian obelisk and put it right in the middle of, I think, Piazza di Pietro or something like that, Peter's Piazza, and they put it right in the middle. Right in the middle. You know, whatever. This is the famous passage that I'm sure you're all familiar about. This is Matthew chapter 24, and we're beginning in verse 15. Matthieu 24:15. Here's the connection. Here's the connection. Matthew 24:15. The Lord tells the Jews, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So Jesus Christ expects us to be familiar with Daniel. Stand in the holy place. When you see that abomination, stand in the holy place. So that image, the abomination is the image of the Antichrist according to Revelation 13. So the abomination of desolation, guys, is the image of the Antichrist, which the Antichrist will set up ultimately in Jerusalem. And the Lord says, when you see the image get set up in the temple, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes, because those are the days of the great tribulation. In the temple, what there was in the temple, you had in the holiest of holies, the holiest place, you had the Ark of the Covenant, and you had the two cherubims of gold, and they were massive coming up out of it. And basically, it was God's throne, and God would invisibly sit there, one hand on one cherub, one hand on one cherub, and receive worship. The high priest would come in with a cloud of incense, so he wouldn't see, because if he saw, he would die. Couldn't even see. So it was an invisible worship to what was the image of God in there. So what the devil does is he goes in the very same place and he sets up his own image. He says, you worship me. He's going to reveal himself, showing himself that he is God, Paul says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. That's the abomination of desolation. The Holy Spirit will get out of that temple at that point, and Jerusalem becomes desolate at that point. Now, the interesting thing is that Nebuchadnezzar, yes? Si c'est dans le temple où? Je sais pas. That's a good question. So, we often forget when we're discussing that there was actually, in those days... Oh, sorry. Je m'excuse. I'm sorry. There was the question is the image inside like the holiest, or is it outside, like somewhere in the courtyard where people can actually see it? Okay, and it's probably where people can see it. He's sitting on the inside. He's sitting on the throne on the inside, and people can see it because they're commanded to worship it like Nebuchadnezzar. And the Lord says, when you see the abomination of desolation, you need to flee. And well, we often forget when we're discussing this in Ezekiel chapter 8, at the same time that Nebuchadnezzar has got his image going, there's actually the Jews themselves had set up the image of jealousy. If you've ever read Ezekiel, remember when he brings Ezekiel in spirit to the temple and he says, come and see these abominations that they do. At one point he has them dig through the wall. Remember that? The first one he shows them is there's an image of jealousy in the north court, if I remember. So the Jews had already begun doing that in their temple, what Nebuchadnezzar was doing in Shinar. which tells you that there's probably going to be two such programs going at the same time, one in Iraq and one in Jerusalem, eventually the one in Jerusalem being the main one once the Antichrist moves from Rome or from Iraq into Jerusalem. Yeah, it is probably somewhere where people can see it. And here's the connection, is that Nebuchadnezzar's image is in the plain. It's in the plain of Shinar. He says, so the reason why it's in the plain, it's so high so everybody can see it. And that's what's going to happen there. People will see it and the Lord commands them to run.
Would the image look like an obelisk?
I don't know.
don't know.
I don't know. It could be an image of the Antichrist himself. I think it's probably an image of the Antichrist himself, yeah. Yeah.